The Galactic Empire had long reigned supreme, its dominion stretching across countless star systems, its fleets gleaming with the brilliance of advanced technology, and its soldiers revered as the pinnacle of strength and discipline. For centuries, the Empire had crushed rebellions, subjugated lesser species, and expanded its borders with ruthless efficiency. Its leaders, the High Command, were revered as infallible, their decisions unquestioned, their vision of galactic order unchallenged. The Empire's arrogance was not born of ignorance but of proven superiority, or so they believed. Their soldiers, towering and genetically enhanced, were the embodiment of this superiority, their very presence enough to quell dissent before it began. Yet, as the Empire's reach extended further into the uncharted fringes of the galaxy, they encountered something they could not immediately comprehend: a small, seemingly insignificant force of soldiers who defied all expectations. The first reports from the outer colonies were dismissive, almost laughable. Scouts described a ragtag group of beings, smaller in stature, lacking the imposing physicality of Imperial troops. Their equipment appeared rudimentary, their ships slow and outdated. The High Command scoffed at the notion that such a force could pose any threat. Weaklings, they called them, a term that spread through the ranks with derisive glee. The Empire's soldiers, bred for war and conditioned to view themselves as invincible, echoed this sentiment. To them, these newcomers were little more than a nuisance, a minor distraction in their grand campaign of conquest. But as the weeks passed, the scouts' reports grew more frequent, and the tone shifted subtly. The weak soldiers were not retreating as expected. Instead, they were holding their ground, their tactics unorthodox but effective. They struck quickly and disappeared before the Empire could retaliate, their movements unpredictable, their strategies confounding. The Empire's commanders, accustomed to straightforward battles against inferior foes, found themselves frustrated. Casualties, though minimal by Imperial standards, began to mount. The soldiers, once eager for an easy victory, grew uneasy. There was something about these adversaries that defied explanation, a resilience, a tenacity that should not have been possible. Among the Imperial ranks was Commander Valen, a seasoned officer whose loyalty to the Empire was matched only by her keen intellect. She had risen through the ranks not through brute force but through her ability to adapt, to think beyond the rigid doctrines of the High Command. When the reports of the weak soldiers reached her, she was intrigued rather than dismissive. She requested permission to lead a reconnaissance mission, hoping to uncover the truth behind these enigmatic foes. The High Command, confident in her abilities, granted her request, though they saw little value in the endeavor. To them, the outcome was inevitable: the Empire would crush these upstarts as they had crushed so many others. Valen's mission brought her to a remote outpost on the edge of Imperial territory, a desolate world where the weak soldiers had been sighted. Her fleet arrived under the cover of darkness, their advanced cloaking technology rendering them invisible to primitive senses. What she found was both puzzling and unsettling. The enemy camp was small, barely a fraction the size of an Imperial outpost, yet it was meticulously organized. The soldiers moved with purpose, their discipline evident despite their lack of imposing stature. Valen observed them through her scope, noting the way they communicated, not with the rigid formality of Imperial troops but with a fluid, almost instinctive coordination. They were not just soldiers, they were a unit, bound by something deeper than orders. As night fell, Valen ordered a small team to infiltrate the camp, hoping to gather intelligence. The mission was supposed to be routine, a simple matter of overwhelming the enemy with superior technology and training. But the moment her team breached the perimeter, chaos erupted. The weak soldiers reacted with startling speed, their movements precise and deliberate. They used the terrain to their advantage, turning the Empire's advanced equipment against them. Valen watched in disbelief as her team was systematically dismantled, not by brute force but by ingenuity and adaptability. For the first time in her career, she felt a flicker of doubt. The retreat was humiliating, a blow to both her pride and the Empire's reputation. When she reported her findings to the High Command, they dismissed her concerns, attributing the failure to bad luck and underestimation. But Valen knew better. These soldiers were not weak, they were something else entirely. She began to study their tactics, piecing together fragments of information from intercepted communications and battlefield reports. The more she learned, the more she realized how little the Empire truly understood. These adversaries were not just a threat, they were a revelation, a challenge to everything the Empire believed about strength and power. As the section drew to a close, Valen stood on the bridge of her ship, staring out at the stars. The Empire's arrogance had blinded them to the truth, but she could no longer ignore it. These soldiers, whoever they were, had exposed a flaw in the Empire's foundation, a flaw that could bring the entire system crashing down. And yet, there was something else, something she could not yet articulate. These soldiers fought not for conquest or glory but for something deeper, something she could not yet comprehend. The realization left her uneasy, a quiet dread settling in her chest. The Empire had mocked them, dismissed them, but Valen knew the truth: the real battle had only just begun. The revelation came not with a fanfare but with a quiet, chilling certainty. Commander Valen sat in her quarters, surrounded by holographic displays of intercepted transmissions and fragmented data. For weeks, she had pieced together clues, her mind racing to understand the enigma of the so-called weak soldiers. Their language, their tactics, their very presence defied explanation. And then, in a single moment, it all clicked. The words on the screen before her were unmistakable, their meaning clear despite the unfamiliar dialect. These soldiers were not some unknown species from the fringes of the galaxy. They were humans. The realization struck her like a physical blow. Humans, Earthlings, as they were sometimes called, were a species the Empire had long dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. Their homeworld, a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, had been catalogued centuries ago but deemed unworthy of conquest. The Empire's scouts had reported a species divided, prone to conflict, and technologically inferior. Yet here they were, standing against the might of the Galactic Empire, not as scattered rebels but as a cohesive, formidable force. Valen's mind raced, struggling to reconcile the Empire's arrogance with the undeniable evidence before her. She brought her findings to the High Command, her voice steady but laced with urgency. The council chamber, a vast hall of polished obsidian and shimmering light, was filled with the Empire's most powerful leaders. They listened in silence as she presented her case, their expressions shifting from skepticism to disbelief. "Humans," one of the commanders sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You expect us to believe that these weaklings, these primitives, are the ones causing us trouble?" Valen met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. "They are not what we thought," she said. "Underestimate them, and we will fall." Her words were met with derision, but Valen could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. The High Command was not accustomed to failure, and the recent setbacks had shaken their confidence. Reluctantly, they authorized her to lead a full-scale investigation, though they made it clear that they expected results, not excuses. Valen accepted the assignment without hesitation, her mind already racing with plans. She would uncover the truth about these humans, no matter the cost. Her first step was to capture one of them alive, a task easier said than done. The humans fought with a ferocity and ingenuity that made them elusive targets. Their small, agile ships darted through the battlefield like shadows, striking with precision before vanishing into the void. Their ground troops were no less formidable, using the terrain to their advantage and exploiting every weakness in the Empire's tactics. Valen studied their movements, searching for patterns, for vulnerabilities. Finally, she found her opportunity. The ambush was meticulously planned, a trap designed to isolate a single human soldier. Valen's team struck with surgical precision, overwhelming the target before he could react. When the dust settled, they had their prize, a human, battered but alive. He was brought to Valen's ship, his hands bound, his expression defiant. She studied him closely, noting the differences from the Empire's soldiers. He was smaller, yes, but there was a fire in his eyes, a determination that belied his physical stature. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The human met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm just a soldier," he said. "But you're in way over your head." His words were a challenge, a reminder of the Empire's hubris. Valen ignored the jab, focusing instead on the task at hand. She interrogated him for hours, probing for information, but the human was evasive, his answers cryptic. Yet even in his silence, she learned much. His resilience, his refusal to break, spoke volumes about the strength of his species. When she finally released him, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. These humans were not just soldiers, they were something more, something the Empire had failed to understand. The turning point came during a skirmish on a barren moon. Valen led her forces against a human outpost, confident in her strategy. But the humans were ready. They had anticipated her every move, their defenses impenetrable, their counterattacks devastating. The battle raged for hours, the Empire's forces pushed to their limits. Valen watched in horror as her soldiers fell, their confidence shattered by the humans' relentless assault. For the first time in her career, she felt the sting of defeat. As she retreated, her ship battered and her crew demoralized, Valen's thoughts turned to the human she had captured. His words echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the Empire's arrogance. "You're in way over your head." He had been right. The Empire had underestimated the humans, dismissed them as weak, and now they were paying the price. But Valen was not ready to admit defeat. She would learn from this, adapt, and find a way to turn the tide. The humans had exposed the Empire's flaws, but they had also revealed their own. And Valen intended to exploit them. The section ended with Valen standing on the bridge of her ship, staring out at the stars. The humans were no longer an enigma, they were a challenge, a test of the Empire's strength and resolve. She would not fail. The galaxy was watching, and the stakes had never been higher. The battle was far from over, and Valen was determined to see it through to the end. The Empire's defeat on the barren moon sent shockwaves through its ranks. For the first time in living memory, the invincible war machine had been humbled, its soldiers retreating in disarray, its commanders scrambling to salvage their pride. Commander Valen stood at the center of the storm, her mind a tempest of conflicting emotions. She had warned the high command of the humans' resilience, but even she had underestimated their cunning. The battle had been a revelation, a brutal reminder that the Empire's dominance was not unassailable. As she reviewed the aftermath, a single thought consumed her. The humans had exposed a fatal flaw in the Empire's foundation, and if left unchecked, they would exploit it to its fullest. The High Command, once a bastion of unshakable confidence, was now a fractured council of doubt and recrimination. Valen's warnings, once dismissed as paranoia, were now met with uneasy silence. The commanders who had mocked her now looked to her for answers, their arrogance tempered by fear. "What do we do?" one of them asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Valen's response was immediate and unwavering. "We adapt," she said. "We learn from them. If we cannot match their strength, we must surpass it." Her plan was audacious, a departure from the Empire's rigid doctrines. She proposed a radical shift in strategy, one that embraced the humans' unpredictability rather than resisting it. The High Command, desperate for a solution, reluctantly agreed. Valen was given command of a specialized task force, its mission to study the humans and develop countermeasures. It was a daunting task, but Valen welcomed the challenge. She had seen the human strength firsthand, and she was determined to understand it. Her first step was to gather intelligence, not just on the humans' tactics but on their culture, their history, their very essence. She dispatched scouts to infiltrate human settlements, their missions cloaked in secrecy. The reports that came back were both enlightening and unsettling. The humans were a species of contradictions, capable of both great cruelty and profound compassion. They were divided yet united, fragile yet resilient. Their strength, it seemed, lay not in their technology or their physical prowess but in their adaptability, their ability to endure and overcome. Valen pored over the data, her mind racing to find patterns, to uncover the secrets of the human success. She studied their wars, their revolutions, their greatest triumphs and darkest failures. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. The humans thrived in adversity, their creativity and determination fueled by hardship. They were not bound by the rigid hierarchies that defined the Empire. Instead, they embraced individuality, their strength derived from their diversity. It was a revelation, one that challenged everything Valen had been taught. Armed with this knowledge, she began to implement changes within her task force. She encouraged innovation, rewarding creativity and initiative. She fostered a sense of camaraderie, breaking down the barriers of rank and privilege. Her soldiers, initially skeptical, soon embraced the new approach, their morale bolstered by the promise of a greater purpose. Valen watched with pride as her team began to transform, their confidence growing with each small victory. The true test came during a skirmish on a remote asteroid. The humans had established a hidden base, their presence a threat to the Empire's supply lines. Valen led her task force in a daring assault, their strategy a blend of imperial discipline and human ingenuity. The battle was fierce, the humans fighting with their trademark tenacity. But this time, the Empire was ready. Valen's forces moved with precision, their tactics fluid and unpredictable. They exploited the humans' weaknesses, their adaptability matching that of their adversaries. When the dust settled, the Empire emerged victorious, the human base in ruins. It was a turning point, a moment of vindication for Valen and her task force. The victory was not just a military triumph but a validation of her approach. The humans, once an insurmountable threat, were now a challenge to be met and overcome. Yet even in victory, Valen felt a pang of unease. The humans had been defeated, but they were far from broken. Their resilience, their determination, was a force that could not be extinguished. She knew that the battle was far from over, that the humans would adapt and strike back with renewed vigor. As she stood on the bridge of her ship, gazing out at the stars, Valen felt a sense of clarity. The Empire's arrogance had blinded them to the truth, but she had seen it, and she would not forget. The humans were not just an enemy, they were a mirror, reflecting the Empire's flaws and its potential. If the Empire was to survive, it would need to change, to embrace the lessons of its adversaries. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and sacrifice. But Valen was ready. The galaxy was changing, and she would ensure that the Empire changed with it. The section ended with Valen's task force regrouping, their spirits high but their resolve tempered by the knowledge of the challenges ahead. The humans had been defeated, but the war was far from over. The Empire's future hung in the balance, and Valen was determined to shape it. The stars stretched out before her, infinite and unknowable, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the endless possibilities it held. The battle had been won, but the struggle for survival had only just begun. The victory on the asteroid was a beacon of hope for the Empire, but it was a fragile one. Commander Valen knew that the humans would not remain idle. Their resilience, their ability to adapt and strike back, was their greatest strength. As her task force regrouped and repaired their ships, she found herself haunted by the thought of what the humans might do next. The galaxy was vast, and the humans had proven themselves masters of unpredictability. Valen could not afford to rest, not even for a moment. Her fears were soon realized. Reports began to trickle in from the outer colonies. Human forces had launched a series of coordinated attacks, striking at key Imperial outposts with surgical precision. These were not the desperate, scattered assaults of a weakened enemy. They were calculated, deliberate, and devastating. The humans had adapted, their tactics evolving in response to the Empire's newfound strategies. Valen's task force was dispatched to counter the threat, but even as they raced to the front lines, she could feel the weight of the challenge ahead. The first engagement was a brutal reminder of the humans' ingenuity. Valen's forces arrived at a besieged outpost to find the humans had turned the Empire's own defenses against them. They had hacked into the outpost systems, disabling its shields and weaponry before launching their assault. The battle was chaotic, the Empire's forces struggling to regain control. Valen fought alongside her soldiers, her mind racing to outmaneuver the humans. But for every move she made, they seemed to anticipate her, their coordination flawless, their resolve unshakable. As the battle raged, Valen found herself face to face with a human soldier. He was young, his face smeared with dirt and blood, but his eyes burned with determination. They fought fiercely, their clash a microcosm of the larger conflict. Valen's training and experience gave her the edge, but the human's tenacity was unlike anything she had encountered. In the end, she emerged victorious, but the encounter left her shaken. The human had fought not out of hatred or a desire for conquest, but out of a belief in something greater, a belief that had driven him to risk everything. The outpost was eventually secured, but the cost was high. Valen's task force had suffered heavy casualties, their morale battered by the humans' relentless assault. As she surveyed the aftermath, she felt a growing sense of unease. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for a cause, a vision of the galaxy that stood in stark contrast to the Empire's. Their strength came not from fear or coercion, but from unity and purpose. It was a realization that struck at the heart of Valen's beliefs, challenging everything she had been taught. She returned to the High Command with a grim report, her words measured but laced with urgency. "The humans are not just an enemy," she said. "They are a movement. If we do not understand that, we will lose this war." The commanders listened in silence, their faces etched with concern. For the first time, Valen saw a glimmer of doubt in their eyes, a recognition that the Empire's dominance was not guaranteed. But old habits die hard, and the High Command's response was predictably cautious. They authorized Valen to continue her efforts, but they stopped short of embracing the radical changes she proposed. Frustrated but undeterred, Valen returned to her task force, her resolve stronger than ever. She knew that the Empire's survival depended on its ability to adapt, to shed its arrogance and embrace a new way of thinking. She began to implement changes within her ranks, fostering a culture of collaboration and innovation. Her soldiers, once bound by rigid hierarchies, were encouraged to think for themselves, to question and challenge. It was a risky move, one that drew criticism from traditionalists within the Empire, but Valen believed it was necessary. The humans, meanwhile, continued to press their advantage. Their attacks grew bolder, their strategies more sophisticated. They targeted the Empire's supply lines, disrupting its ability to wage war. They rallied other species to their cause, offering them a vision of freedom and equality. The Empire, once a monolithic force, found itself increasingly isolated, its influence waning. Valen watched with a mixture of admiration and dread as the humans' movement gained momentum, their ideals resonating across the galaxy. The climax came during a battle for a strategically vital star system. The humans had amassed a formidable fleet, their ships a patchwork of stolen Imperial technology and homegrown innovation. Valen's task force was outnumbered and outgunned, but she refused to back down. The battle was a maelstrom of chaos and destruction, the stars themselves seeming to tremble under the weight of the conflict. Valen fought with everything she had, her mind racing to outthink the humans. But even as her forces gained ground, she could feel the tide turning against them. In the end, it was not the humans' superior tactics or technology that decided the battle, but their unyielding spirit. They fought not for conquest, but for a future they believed in, and that belief gave them strength. Valen's forces were forced to retreat, their ships battered and their spirits broken. As she watched the humans' fleet disappear into the void, she felt a profound sense of loss. The Empire had been defeated, not just in battle, but in its very essence. The section ended with Valen standing on the bridge of her ship, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The humans had won, but their victory was not the end. It was a beginning, a chance to reshape the galaxy in their image. Valen knew that the Empire's time was over, but she also knew that the struggle for survival was far from finished. The stars stretched out before her, infinite and unknowable, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the endless possibilities it held. The battle had been lost, but the war for the future had only just begun.